Hello and welcome to Cupcake Addiction's giant Reese's peanut butter cup tutorial, where I'll be showing you how to make this awesome giant sized Reese's peanut butter cup. Tools and equipment that we will be using today. I've got a 9-inch cake board. Now I've pre-iced that just using some orange fondant, and I've got a whole tutorial that shows you how to ice a cake board. I will leave a link to that in the description box below. Just to make my Reese's peanut butter cup stand out a little bit more, I've just printed out a Reese's logo just on a little bit of sticky label, and I'm going to stick that down to the board at the very last minute. I've got a serrated edge knife, a spatula, I've got a spoon. I've pre-prepared some of the pieces of today's tutorial just to make things a little bit faster. So of course I've got my silicone giant cupcake mold or my giant cupcake case. I'm only using the bottom half of that today. In that I've pre-prepared our base for our giant Reese's peanut butter cup. I've also pre-baked just the bottom half of a giant cupcake. So I've got a whole set of tutorials, which I will also link to in the description box below, which show you how to fill and how to bake and how to extract your giant cupcakes if you haven't made them before. I'm only baking the bottom half today, and I know that I need to make a bunch of cake pops, so I've baked a whole bottom half. But in reality for this, we are making it a bit shorter so that it looks like a genuine Reese's peanut butter cup. You can actually use half the amount of mixture that I show you in that giant cupcake case to make your bottom half a little bit smaller, because we are going to be carving it up and not using quite as much as all this cake. I've got 2 cups of our perfectly pipeable buttercream frosting. I will leave a link to that recipe in the description box below. I've made some chocolate ganache. I will leave a recipe for this in the description box below, so just the ingredients, but basically I've used some whipping cream and also some chocolate, and I've just mixed the two together, microwave them until they're in liquid form. That's going to make our ganache today. I've got 2 very good sized tablespoons, so 2 heaped tablespoons of smooth peanut butter, any brand you like, and I've got an electric mixer. So let's get started. Now, as I mentioned, I've pre-made the outer shell for our Reese's peanut butter cup. We do have a tutorial, as I mentioned, I'll link to that in the description box below. But what you want to do here is I've made it in this cupcake case. Normally we bring it all the way up to the top, but I've only brought it sort of 3/4 of the way to the top. So I've left about 1 inch or so at the top there. And because I had a bit of a rough and ragged edge, and we want a really nice smooth top edge for our peanut butter cup, I heated up a pan on the stove, and I just picked up my giant cupcake case, and when the pan was nice and hot, sat it down on the searing hot pan, twisted it a couple of times, and picked it back up. That's given me a really nice smooth edge, and it's made sure that all sides are completely even. So that's how I've achieved our sort of half-sized or 3/4 sized little chocolate patty pan today. And I'm going to put that just off to the side along with our giant cupcake case. So what we're going to do here is this is going to be sort of a part cake peanut butter cup. Obviously we don't just want to have chocolate and peanut butter in there, it's going to be way too much. So I'm going to use my serrated edge knife, and I'm just going to carve down this giant cupcake. I'm going to carve the sides off it. I always use a serrated edge knife for carving my cakes. Gives you a really nice clean cut and allows you to almost saw through the cake. All right, so those other offcuts, as I mentioned, fantastic to use for cake pops, and that's exactly what I'll be doing with it. So now you just want to turn your giant cupcake, and I'm just going to cut about 1 inch or just under 1 inch of the bottom of that, as straight as I can across. Perfect. Now you want to take just a little bit of that chocolate ganache, and this is going to act like a little bit of a glue, and you just want to put just a dollop or 2 of that in the bottom. It's just going to stick the bottom layer of our cake down. So I'm just going to pick it up, drop it in, and I'm pushing it down just to make sure that it attaches nicely to that ganache glue that we've put down there. Now to pre-prepare our next piece, I'm actually going to skip a section in the middle. So I'm going to cut out about 1 centimetre or so, or about 1/2 inch. I'm going to pop that off to the side. You can eat it, you can use it for cake pops. And then I'm going to cut another centimetre or so, or 1/2 inch of the higher section. Now the reason that I've skipped out that centre bit is because I want the edges to sort of widen up with the giant cupcake case. So if I don't skip out that section, you're going to end up with a big gap, because we've sort of put some frosting in the middle and we haven't allowed for the widening of the case by choosing the wider portion of our cake. I'm just going to have a little tidy up, and then we're going to come back and continue. All right, so things are looking a little bit tidier and a little bit more manageable. Now, we want to just make our peanut butter frosting. So this frosting, it is as simple as taking that peanut butter and spooning it into the frosting. And I'm using quite a bit of peanut butter. You can adjust the amount that you use just depending on what your tastes are, how much you love or don't love peanut butter. But for me, I want this to be a really peanut buttery frosting. I want the flavour to be quite intense. This is, after all, a peanut butter cup. When you mix through your peanut butter, you don't want to over mix it or it'll start to go a little bit too chunky. So just turn it on to a low speed and just mix it until it's just combined. Perfect. So that there is plenty of mixing. You don't want to do any more mixing than that. So now I'm just going to take my spatula and I'm just going to spatula in our peanut butter frosting. You can use the back of a spoon just to help you get that frosting off that spatula. And I'm putting in about that centimetre or so amount that we cut out of the giant cupcake cake section. Perfect. So smooth it right down, push it all the way out to the edges. So it's going to sort of form a little bit of an airtight seal for that bottom section. And now we get to the part where we're going to put in our last piece. So hopefully what you want is for this last piece to sit in really nice and flush up against the sides here. Beautiful. So I've got almost a perfect fit. Almost a perfect fit. I'm actually going to take that and I'm just going to push it down a little bit just to compact it into that frosting, because what I want is I want that cake to be sitting about 1 millimetre or 2. So just the tiniest little bit inside the line of that giant cupcake case, and that's going to be so that when we flood it with our ganache, the ganache doesn't dribble over the sides. So just pushing it down a little bit, compacting everything. So now I'm going to take my ganache, and I will mention when you finish making your ganache, it will be quite warm. So I pop mine in the fridge just for 10 minutes. You don't want to put it in too long or it will completely harden, but you don't want this to be hot. You don't really want it to even be warm because it will melt your chocolate outside, and you don't want that to happen. So now I'm just going to take my spoon and I'm just going to dribble that ganache. And for this you can use milk or dark chocolate, but whatever chocolate you use for your giant cupcake case or your giant Reese's peanut butter cup case, you need to use the same chocolate in your ganache so that it is uniform and so that it all looks the same. So milk chocolate or dark chocolate, it really doesn't matter. Now with that ganache, I'm trying not to pick up any crumbs from the cake underneath, but I'm also not going too crazy around the outside edges because it is going to naturally sort of flow out a little bit, and I really don't want it to trickle over the edges. Just filling in any little gaps where you can see cake so that you've got all ganache all the way to the edges. And now that that's had just a minute or so to settle, so I know that it's not really drizzling or dribbling anymore, I'm just going to use the back of my spoon and I'm just going to drag the ganache just a tiny, tiny little bit so that it's going completely on that outer edge. That's going to give us that really nice seamless finish of a real peanut butter cup. Now I'm going to take that whole thing, and before I put it on my board, I'm just going to pick it up really gently and just give it just a couple of little taps on the bench. Don't be too rough with it. You don't want to crack your outer case, but that's just going to smooth off that top beautifully. Now to stick it onto my board, just slide it out of the way a little bit. I'm going to just put down a little bit more ganache, which is once again going to act like our glue. I'm going to attach mine just back on the board a little bit so that when I do put that Reese's sign on, it's got plenty of room. So just a little dollop of ganache there. As I mentioned, this will set really hard, so when it actually does set, it's going to be perfectly fine to cut through, and it's also going to act like a really beautiful glue. Pop down your giant cupcake. And then because I've printed this out on a sticky label, for me it's as simple as just pulling off the backing to the sticky label and sticking down my little Reese's logo. So there you've got your completed giant Reese's peanut butter cup. I recommend cutting into this with a really hot, sharp knife. So take a knife, run it under some hot water just for a couple of minutes before you cut. That's going to give you a really nice cut through that chocolate shell. When you cut into that, you're going to get layers. You're going to get the crunch of that chocolate shell. You're going to get your beautiful soft cake, that delicious peanut butter frosting with yet more cake on top, and then that gorgeous ganache topping. This size cake is meant to serve about 6 to 8 people. Absolutely perfect for small gatherings and for small birthday parties. I hope you guys love this giant Reese's peanut butter cup. If you know somebody who loves Reese's to bits, make sure that you share this tutorial with them so they too can experience supersized Reese's peanut butter cups. Thanks very much for tuning in.